one of the things you can make sure you have are some papers and pencils or whatever you like, pens, colored markers, whatever you like to work with. Have those in front of you. Have those ready. I'm going to turn off the light a little bit so I'm not in the dark. And this will be the last RX call for the year. Is that right, Shannon? We won't be doing one of these in December. We take December off and use the time that we are in the office for our client calls. As you guys know, this is one of our public service calls where we do this for free and want to keep doing that. So when we have a limited time in December, we just cut this one short. So I hope that's okay with you guys. So you have your papers and pencils. Okay. You're welcome, Jen. Very, very welcome. And Brenda, hopefully you're coming on. I know you're down in a beautiful Palm Desert area, so maybe background noise with parents, maybe not, but see. So before we get started, I wanted to just share something because we have a lot of feelings going on across the country, and it's not just globally. I was talking to a woman today from the UK. The impact of what happened over the last 24 hours has influenced everybody's life on the planet. And so I wanted to share something that just came to me this morning. In either way that you look at how your politics fall or how you voted or what you believe in, we do have to look at what's happening in the world and in our country and recognize that a lot of things have shifted and a lot of unrest exists. And so in that unrest, this is what I would like to say. And that is that for those who feel like something has been lost, it has not. And for those who feel like we can perceive that something's been taken, it has not been taken. And some of what we think has been destroyed, it has not been destroyed. There is a loss, and in that huge revelation around what's happened in the loss as per a tally, what we really have is a vision of what's waiting to be built, what we have not yet taken time to build. Standing in the dearth of what just happened, it offers up a lot of clarity. And in lack, sometimes that helps us focus on what has not yet been established or reinvented, and maybe even what has not been built. So we're now facing an opportunity to build from the ground up. And what we can seek and what we can do is to say, where do we start? And we can only start with what is mine, what is yours, and ask ourselves, as I often do when my heart is broken open, questions like, what's mine to lean into at this time? What's mine to heal? What's mine to strengthen? What's mine to stretch and grow? What's mine? What is me? And I found that it's when our hearts are broken open, when we look among the shards, that's when we find the parts of our heart that keep on beating life into us. So we have to witness that, we have to honor that, and we have to recognize and be honest about this resilient, formidable part of our identity that we find in those shards today. And when we do that, when we find that life-beating part that keeps giving us life, it's often called self-authorship, which is what we are all about here at Soul Salt. And it makes me think about the buffalo. The next 2 years are probably going to be bumpy for a lot of us. And so my admonition is to be like the buffalo. When there's a storm, like we're standing in, the buffalo just instinctually charge the storm. They go into it. A cow will run from it. A buffalo charges into it, walks into it, because they know that going into the storm head first gets them through the storm faster. And so today, in the wake of the last 24 hours, it's time to be your own version of the buffalo. And coincidentally, that goes right along with our theme today about where we're going and how to build yourself to be ready for what you need to do to reinvent. And so I'm going to take you through a quick story, and I'll share my screen so I can do that. So imagine that you guys are on a red-eye trip, and just raise your hand if you've ever been on a red-eye trip. Okay. The last one I did was from Salt Lake to London. And if you think about red eyes, how many of you noticed that there was often food given to you and a pillow, and that you wanted to use some of the time sleeping if you could on those uncomfortable airplane chairs? You remember those times? So let's put you on a red eye. We're going to go to London from Salt Lake. And that's going to take about 9 hours, 9.5 hours. And so we know that we have some work to do. And we know that we have not only work, but we want to take the food, we need to eat, and we want to sleep. So as we get on the plane and we're getting adjusted and we find our seat, we get buckled in, pull out our computer, whatever we're working on, and imagine that you're working on something. And then the food comes and you get served. And it's in one of those quiet moments in between chewing that you hear something behind you. You hear people having a conversation, two people. And imagine you hear one of them mumbling something that you can't discern. And then the other person says, "That's not true. People still do need you. You're relevant." And it perks your interest a little bit, but hey, you're cool. And you don't turn around and see who that is. You're just interested a little bit about that. And then you go back to finishing your meal and you realize there was one more thing you needed to finish at work or the things that you were doing. And then you're trying to settle in and go to sleep. And then imagine that you're sleeping and you fall asleep and you have a dream. And you're in the dream and you get to meet somebody that you would love to meet, somebody that's alive today. Think about someone you would love to meet. Maybe spend an hour, go to lunch, have coffee, ask a few questions. Somebody you would love to meet, even spend the whole day with. Who would you love to spend the whole day with that's alive? And with that person in your mind, you notice that you can start to feel as you're dreaming about meeting this person, and you're just about to reach out and shake their hand or give them a hug. The plane is starting to descend, and that kind of wakes you up. And you know how that feels when the plane starts to descend and you wake up a little bit. And as you're kind of foggy and coming up to awareness, you hear that couple talk again. And you can't hear what the first person says, but the second person you can hear distinctly again. And they say, "It's not true. You would not be better off dead. People still want and need you." And now you're really wondering, who the heck is that? What's going on there? And you are curious. So you think, okay, as soon as we land, you can casually peek and see who that person is. And what happens is when you land and you're gathering your belongings and you see that person, it's the person that you dreamed of meeting. It's that admired person. And they said something about not having worth. And one of the reasons why I'm bringing this in today is one of the ways to get through reinvention elegantly, with ease, and with as much confidence as possible, because it's a confidence-sucking process. It can make self-doubt look like a big hairy monster. We need to be able to leverage our best self. We need to be able to leverage our inner plumb line, the pieces of us that keep us engaged. And when we have this best self in our hands, and we don't lose it very often, but even the best people, the most iconic, canonized individuals, sometimes have self-doubt, like the person you were thinking of and dreaming of. So I'm going to ask you to do a really simple exercise today. And some of you have done this with me before, and some of you haven't. Just write down on the piece of paper that I cued you to do together before we started. And write down the name, or write down the name, yes, write down the name of this person that you just wanted to meet. And then talk about the traits about that person that made you want to meet them. What stands out about them? Why do you want to meet them? What is it that makes you want to know them? And the more words you can put on the paper, the better. And I can see you all writing, so that's really great to see. You're all getting her done. Anybody that needs a little more time, just hold up your hand. We'll give you some more time. Good, good. Okay, please take the time. There's no rush. Okay, let's kind of discern what just happened. We talk a lot about magnets. If you read my book, you know this story. When we play with magnets, magnets tell us certain things, like what they stick to and what they don't stick to. So we know that they're made of pure iron, some cobalt, some nickel. They're charged. And in that charging, because they have pure iron that they're made out of, they attract pure iron. So you can see these iron filings on the screen. This is literally a bar magnet that's underneath a piece of paper. And then we sprinkled iron filings. And you can see where the bar is in the middle, and you can see the north and south pole of the magnet. And it makes this magnetic field around it, just like if you could do this to the earth and pour iron filings on it, it would make a similar pattern. And the reason that I use this is the analogy is all those words you just wrote are your iron filings, and you're the magnet. And so everything you wrote about that person that you wanted to meet are pieces of who you are. They're pieces of your best self. And they are indicators of potentially some of your unique personal needs, and even more powerfully, big indicators of your value system, that inner plumb line that we just saw on the screen right here. And when we reinvent, the best place to start is to look at the salt of our soul element, our values, and find out when they're in alignment and not in alignment with what we're currently doing for a career and what we want to have be a new career. So that's the first filter. When we are looking at experiments and things that we do in reinvention and potential job opportunities, we want to make sure that it aligns with our values. Now, I just finished a session today with a career reinventor who's going back to a job after not working for a year and a half, and sure that they're going to hate the job, but they're taking it anyway because what they value the most is their personal development And they know that this job will wear them down. It's in the medical field, and they are working with specialized medical technical tools, mechanics, and they have to be in this chaotic space of the hospital using these tools, and it just throws them into chaos. But they're going back because what they really value is their career development and their professionalism, and being off for a year and a half to have a job again gives them a chance to get back into that cycle. So the overarching core value is personal development, and then we will be strategizing how do they look for that next job. So they're using their values as a filter to say yes, even though this is going to be a bridge job and not the job. So the first line of defense or attack, either way you're going toward having the reinvention that you want, is making sure that it aligns with your core values. And I'm wondering if there's anybody on the call right now who has a question or want to raise a hand. Shannon, can you help me see that? If there's anybody. We good? Okay, let's go to the next element. We all know that we can thrive when we have food, water, and air. So who can tell me how long can we go without air? Approximately. Somebody needs to know this. Is it hours, minutes? Is it
6 minutes?
Yes, that's it. That's it. That's the answer. 4 to 6 minutes, sometimes a little bit more depending on our body. That's not very long. How long can we go without water? And that's either days or weeks. What do you think?
Weeks?
It's just days.
That one's just days. Mm-hmm. Yep. And we know that here in Utah because we know a hiker that was caught, his arm was caught in a slot canyon with a boulder falling down on him, and he had to remove his arm so he could get away because he had run out of water. And he knew he only had days to go. So, and he had very few days. He'd almost taken it to the limit. Let's go then to food. Depending on who we are, this is the answer here, Jen. We can go weeks without food, depending upon our built-in supply, our metabolism. A lot of us are going around without knowing it, that we have parts of us that are starving for air, water, and food. And to show that to us, if you look at this disc reader, and if you're working with me, we have your disc assessment. But the first thing you want to do for today's exercise is look at the arrow in the middle and recognize if you're more fast and active and assertive and louder speech, if that describes you more, or the more moderate pace, thoughtful, calm, softer speech. One of those describes you more. It's not in totality, but one of those describes you more. Which one is it? And now that you've decided that, if you decided that you're the arrow going up to the active fast-paced, are you more of a questioner with results being your focus and being more direct in your communication style? Or are you more accepting with enthusiasm and social ability? So you're either a D or an I, if you lead with that. If you were leaning more toward the bottom, you're more calm, softer speech, moderate paced, and thoughtful, then you'll need to say, well, am I more questioning and I'm looking for accuracy, really focused on that, and I can use a lot of analysis? Or are you more accepting and focused on people and being patient and empathic? So choose which one of those you're at, and then recognize that we all have personal needs that show up sometimes on the disc. They're as important as food, water, and air, but because they don't stop our life from happening when they go unmet, they just stop us from having our best self, especially when we're reinventing. If we ignore them, and some of us have, we don't notice it as much. But when we're reinventing, we start paying attention to these unique personal needs, because when they do get met, we're sane, we're stable, and we can be sustainable. All those things are necessary for us to be at our best. And we don't want to reinvent to something worse. We want to reinvent to something better. So if you thought that you were more of the D, you may have some needs to get results. You may have a need for risk. You may have a need for challenge. You may have a need for having control over your environment and for being in the lead. If you found that you led with your I, you may have a need for brainstorming, ideation, innovation. You may need teamwork. You may need to know when you do something well and get kudos for that, because you need to be fed. That part of you that generates more ideas needs that kind of food. And you may need a platform where you can speak and share your voice to motivate and inspire people. If you're a C, you may need things to slow down so you can go deep. So you may need to go deep, be contemplative, be very deliberate in your thinking, use analysis, logic, pragmatism. You may need to get data and information so you can get that stuff and then analyze it and come up with your answers. And you may need to be an expert somewhere, a thought leader somewhere. You may need to be ahead of the game somewhere. If you're an S, you need peace. You need patience. You need people to be compassionate. You need harmony. You need people to work together. You need cooperation. You need to know people are okay. And if not, you need to be able to have some influence on that. So hopefully each of you are identifying some unique personal needs. When I talk about unique personal needs, you can see here that there are some examples on the left. They're not wants. These are needs. Time to think and plan. Weekly wins. And the better we are at discovering what these unique personal needs are, especially when we're reinventing, the healthier we are and the more astute we are when we're going through the reinvention process, because we're being fed. We're not starving somewhere. So the 3 steps are: discover a unique personal need, set up a system to get it met, and repeat it. And this would be a place where if you have a question or you have a comment, because some of you are actually working on this with me, this would be a great place if you wanted to interface with that. Anybody have, and do you see any comment, Shen?
Nope, not yet.
Okay. All right, let's go to the third thing then. It helps if we know our superpowers, our pseudo strengths, and our weaknesses. These are part of one of the chapters in my book, chapter 5. And the benefits of knowing these are that this is where you want to spend most of your time in that thing you're going to reinvent to. And what is that thing? So be thinking of something that you do that fits these criteria. A, you're good at it. B, you love doing it when you're doing it. C, you know you could even grow it more because it's so strong, you know you can get that muscle or that trait bigger. You have a lot of ease when you perform it. You know if you work on it, you can get to some level of mastery. And it puts you in your flow zone when you're there. So write down something, or more than one thing right now, if you will, that tells you this is a superpower today. You're just hearing it. Maybe it's a reiteration of something that you've already worked on. Maybe it's a new thing. But write down one thing that is a superpower from this exercise that you know you'd love this to show up in your next reinvented iteration of yourself. Okay, now that superpower won't have as much juice in it and as much power if we don't also identify pseudo strengths. What we want to do when we find the superpower is really plug it in and use it, pull on that lever all day long. While we're doing that, we need to be able to move away from pseudo strengths. And pseudo strengths are really deceptive sometimes because they're things that we're good at. And if you look back here, that's the first thing on superpowers. We're good at them. So be thinking of something that could be considered one of your pseudo strengths. A pseudo strength you're good at, but you don't love doing it. Notice how that is different than a superpower. A pseudo strength, you're not interested in improving it and growing it, because when you do it, it actually makes you feel weaker. It takes too much effort to perform it. And that is one of the reasons why, if you spend too much time on pseudo strengths, and some of you are leaving an old career because it used to be good, but now you feel like you're just working from pseudo strengths, and it's going to burn you out. It's going to depress you. It takes too much out of you, and you are not interested in growing it. So you're really not engaged. Yes, Akbar?
Hi, Lynn. Hi, everyone. With regards to burnout, if you are doing a job that initially you were enthused and then it became a pseudo strength, and then you go through the burnout cycle through it, and is there anything you can do to stop the burnout cycle?
Not stay there too long.
Oh, okay.
But if you are already burned out, you may have to take a sabbatical leave, or you may have to start doing things you enjoy more in your personal life. Like, one way to battle burnout is to go do a service project in something that you really enjoy in your community while you're lessening the amount of time you're doing that task. And so the way to handle a pseudo strength, if you're being really wise, is acknowledge that sometimes you have to do some of it, but do very less of it. So the way it works in my world would be, and maybe this helps, Akbar, try to spend 80 to 90% of your time with your strengths. Recognize that you may have to spend 5 or 10% at pseudo strengths. And then that brings up this weaknesses.
Gotcha. Right.
Okay, thank you for that question.
Thanks.
Yeah, a weakness is different than a pseudo strength. It's something that could break you if you had to do it all the time. It interferes with progress and joy. You notice that you keep thinking that you've got to change things about it. It undermines your superpower, and mitigation helps. So we have found in lots of leadership research, especially around flow zone, peak performance, bringing your best self to work, if you are not paying attention to pseudo strengths and weaknesses at the same time you're trying to leverage your strengths, you will not get as far. So what we do with weaknesses is that we find them and we don't try to turn them into a strength. They will never do that. They don't have the capacity of trying to make a banana turn into an apple. It's not going to happen. What we want to do is take the weakness and manage it. Get it to a place where it has a dull roll, like it's just a low tone, and you have a plan of how you mitigate it. And here's how I did this. I didn't even have a pseudo strength in this. It was a weakness. When I came in to start Soul Salt, I knew I wasn't good with numbers. And in college, I only had one math class. Somehow I had done so well in math on my entrance exams that I only had to take one math class. And I always consider that a miracle, or I'd still be spinning in college trying to get through math classes. And so as soon as I had a company built and it had formed into an entity, I took part of my budget and hired a bookkeeper and an accountant, the same person. And I'd take my little shoebox with my receipts, that's how sophisticated my numbers game was, and my little ledger to them, and they would help me with my books every month. I knew that was going to be a weakness. So immediately when I started Soul Salt, I managed against it. I had somebody else take that on and teach me what I could learn, but I never tried to turn it into a strength. So be thinking of something that you're doing that fits the pseudo strength that you can delegate away from and do less of. And think of something that's a weakness and figure out, how do you mitigate against it? How do you do something in such a way where that weakness can't trip you up? How do you plan around it, mitigate it? Because these are the things like swimming across the pond with a bag of rocks on your back. If you're not managing weaknesses, I don't care how strong you are, that's going to wear you out. And here's what happens. Here's the research. When we find our best self, the stuff that we're starting to hit upon right now, the salt of your soul, these foundational pieces to reinventing, know this, and you'll be 32% more engaged in your reinvention process. The people you interact with will become 11% happier, and so will you. Because you're finding success because you're hitting on cylinders that feel like success to you. You'll also notice that if you're using your strengths, you become 14% more productive, you can be 23% more profitable, and you can retain the talent around you if they're working from strength, or you retain yourself in the position you are by 71% if you're working from strength. It's one of the reasons why Shannon and I can stay in the same role at Soul Salt for years, because we both have found our sweet spot for our superpowers, and we've learned how to leverage pseudo strengths between each other and weaknesses between each other. Would you want to speak to that, Shannon? Anything you want to say?
Amen. Very true. For me, it's awesome because I think we've all been in a position where we are hesitant to say, oh, I'm not good at, right? But at Soul Salt, there's just such an understanding that if you're working from strengths, that's the best place you could be. And so I don't feel bad saying, not my strength. Probably shouldn't do it. We should probably find someone else, or vice versa. So I love that about it.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, so that's it's how it works. We're living proof of that. And so the final tips I want to give you, and then we'll open it up for questions. Today, what we've talked about are your basic steps, finding the salt of your soul, the title of our company and the title of our book. Find your values and align with them while you're reinventing. That keeps you in your integrity. Find your unique personal needs and get them met. That brings you the sanity, the stability, the sustainability. And I was talking with one of you this morning, and you really landed on the way you treat yourself. If you're getting your unique personal needs met, reflects in the way that you reinvent your career. If you're not getting your needs met, the reinvention is going to be anemic and starving. When we leverage our superpowers, delegate out the pseudo strengths that we can, and manage and mitigate against our weaknesses, we are in a position where we are our most formidable, strongest self. And when we're going through reinvention, a lot of times we might feel raggedy. We might feel like we're running on fumes. Let's put it that way, because there's so much going on. And I'm here to say, find the salt of your soul, let that lead your reinvention process. And that is how you get through it with as much elegance and as much ease as possible. So if you're not following us, please follow us. Bring up questions now. I'm here for you. Asia, I know you missed the piece I was talking to you about earlier, so I'm just going to send you the recording of that. Yeah. What questions do you guys have? What thoughts do you have? What did you find useful today?
I'm kind of curious about weaknesses. It seems that they could be pretty sneaky. Like I'm used to muscling through or pushing through. Like this is a challenge. This is part of what this is, right? And because I'm so engaged in or focused on doing the thing or pushing, that kind of thing, I'm just recognizing after this presentation and this conversation here that I might actually be trying to push through a weakness or with a weakness, and my frustration level would even be higher. So now I'm going to more than likely drop into distraction or avoidance, but it still has to be there. So now I'm getting down on myself. So on weaknesses, what would be your suggestion on maybe, are there some specific questions we can ask ourselves about that?
Why don't we, do you want to do some on the spot coaching on this one, Asia? Would that help?
Sure.
What are you willing to share about the weakness that you're wondering about?
I think my weakness mainly, well, I was going to say my weakness was distraction, but after I was saying this, I'm like, oh, I'm probably trying to avoid something I don't want to do. So when you were talking about numbers, that would be a similar weakness of mine, and not feeling that I've got the financial freedom, or I don't know. The thought is like, oh, I don't have money for that. And maybe I, like to like say numbers are not my strength. And so I want to talk about the numbers, I guess. I've had a very interesting experience through the last 13 years, which is, oh, numbers aren't my strength, so I'm just gonna turn everything over to this accountant. But then I have not even taken ownership of what things are. So there's been this really weird gray area of expecting to be informed and expecting to be taken care of, almost like a partnership that I had just divorced, my ex-husband. So I had kind of subconsciously thrown the same responsibilities onto my accountant, but not known. And then now I've realized it's like, wait a minute, now I need to actually have some ownership here.
Right.
So
Right.
it's this really weird kind of like marshy gray area that I'm working in right now.
It is. And I think this might support you, Asia. It's just one of those, you're so great. It's when you and I work together, it's usually a 1 or 2 degree twist of the dial, and then it clicks in. I think another way to frame it so that it makes sense to you is you've identified the weakness, and you've also identified what pieces of your management or mitigation system needs to be. Meaning you can't just hand it off and be ignorant. I couldn't just hand it off and be ignorant. And so your management plan or your mitigation plan will probably be best if it includes understanding certain parts of it that are critical, like KPIs or whatever it is that you need to understand about that process. So your management plan, when we say manage, isn't just handing off and delegating, it's handing off and gaining enough business acumen to be wise to a certain level, but not expecting yourself to be Warren Buffett.
Right. That makes sense. But you used the word delegate. So what's the best definition for delegating? Because in some manner, delegation, I've assumed, is handing off completely. So it sounds like there are levels of delegating.
Yes. And so the best, and I think at one point, one of our highest performing YouTube videos was one on delegation. Because we went through a process of saying, when you hand it off, you need to figure out what parts you're delegating and what kind of communication you need back. And then you need to be responsible for making sure that you have meetings to check in with the person who has the delegated work so that you're informed along the way. So they're empowered to do the work, you're informed along the way because you're still the leader. So I heard something the other day, maybe you guys have seen this meme. Think about leadership, think about partnership, think about self-authorship. They all end in ship. What does a ship do? Takes you places, carries you across places. So your relationship with that person you're delegating to must be a ship. You must both be on board and going in the same direction. So you have to have, the delegation has to have a plan. The management has to have a plan. Lisa.
So I just wanted to make a comment about my relationship with weakness is that I tend to blow them off in the sense that I'm always looking for the silver lining. So I don't want to look at a weakness. I don't want to focus on it. And it serves me okay, but I'm sure that there's a lot of things that I could work on in that kind of, you guys were talking about delegation, that kind of thing. And if I were more aware of what some of my weaknesses are, I might be able to have them managed in a different way than just ignoring them.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you. I think that's really good, Lisa. let's just, so Asia, do you feel complete with what your question was? Okay, so if something else comes up, go there. Lisa, ignoring them to some degree isn't necessarily bad, because sometimes when you focus on them, they grow, you know, they get big and hairy and monstrous. And sometimes the thing to notice, because you're a soccer player, if the weakness is you can't tie your shoelaces well and they keep tripping you up, you can't ignore that.
Right.
However, if your weakness is that you can't tie your shoes, and so you just pull the laces out and you keep running and they don't fall off, you've already had a mitigation plan. So in some ways, your mitigation plan may be, don't worry about the small stuff if it's tiny. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. So we don't want to villainize ourselves and always be looking, because sometimes this happens. Our superpowers are so strong that they exhibit weaknesses if we don't manage those. For instance, I have a really good communicator. This is a CEO that I've been engaged with over the years. I love reading her emails, and I'm not a fan of email unless it's a friend or somebody that I'm really want to read. Shannon knows, because she sometimes has a point, hey, that email is still in here. Can you read that one? So I go to her email because I love her writing. It's engaging. Her mode of communication engages people. I love the way she uses words, the words she chooses. However, she loves it so much, and it's a superpower, that when she's in a meeting with other executives, she fills up the space with all her words. And she talks over people and she doesn't leave space for them. So the superpower got so big, can you see how it's expressing as if it's a weakness? So sometimes the other place to look, Lisa, is not at the weaknesses, but look at your superpowers, see if they had a shadow side, and if we need to maybe manage those a little better. Is there anything coming up in chat, Shannon, that we should know about? Okay. Any other questions? All right. I really appreciate you guys being here today, and never underestimate that these basics, these go back to, these are the things that I track myself on more regularly than any other part of the Soul Salt book. These three things. And I'm not necessarily, well, I am in a reinvention process, because some of you know that I'm working toward an eventual retirement date, whatever that looks like. You know, will I only work with 5 clients a month? Will I still write books? Will I still speak? I'll still be doing something with Soul Salt, but I don't know how much work I'll be doing. And so I am in a reinvention process. These are the 3 go-tos that keep me going, and then some of the other chapters out of the book. But these are your basics. If you need to know, go back to these. If you're ever in doubt, go back to one of these. If you don't know what to do and you're in the reinvention cycle, and you're like, I don't want to stay stagnant and I haven't done anything for a while and I don't have an experiment, go back and see if you can just align better with your values, get a need met, do better with managing a weakness or mitigating against it, do better with not doing so much in your pseudo strengths and leveraging a superpower somehow. These will take you far and wide. And I hope that if you have further questions, you'll just reach out and email me or text me. How's that? All right, everybody. Chin up. Let's be the buffalo. Let's head into that storm. Here we go. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.